Hello everyone, and welcome back to another forecast update. Hope you are doing well and having a great Tuesday. So today we're going to be looking at our severe weather threat over parts of the central United States, and then we'll also be talking about an additional severe weather threat for tomorrow on Wednesday, as well as another severe weather threat on Thursday the 19th. I will have chapters in the video, so if y'all want to go to any part of the video and skip to that part, y'all can. It should be in the description. And then kind of towards the latter half of the video, we'll be talking a little bit about the tropics. And there really isn't a lot to talk about with the tropics, but there are a few areas that we may need to kind of continue to watch over the next week or two. But first here, we'll be looking at our convective outlook. So for the latest 20Z update, this was updated about 51 minutes ago. I'll go ahead and refresh again, 54 minutes ago. And so looking here at our risk, we do have a enhanced risk into much of western Nebraska, then into northwestern Kansas and northeastern Colorado, and around that is a large slight risk extending all the way from parts of New Mexico all the way to the north into parts of northern Montana. In between, early it stops at the Montana and Canadian border there, and then around that is a large marginal risk extending all the way from parts of Montana and North Dakota all the way to the south into parts of the panhandle of Texas and New Mexico. And we also have a marginal risk down here into the parts of the eastern Florida peninsula, and we'll talk about that a little later. But I'm going to do how I usually kind of structure these videos, and we'll talk about the severe weather risk day by day, and then we'll be looking at the models for that day, and then after that we'll continue on to the next day. But going back to the convective outlook here, we do have a little bit of a tornado risk with this into parts of northeastern Montana and parts of extreme northwestern and western North Dakota. And the main reasoning behind this enhanced risk for today is this wind risk with this. And we do have a 30% wind risk into parts of Nebraska, Colorado, as well as northwestern Kansas there. And we have a hatch risk around this entire 30% risk, with that going into parts of the 15% risk area. And so the hatch risk is a 10% or greater probability of wind gust 65 knots or greater within 25 miles of a point inside of this risk with the dashed lines. And then around that is that 15% risk all the way from parts of northern Montana all the way to the south into New Mexico. And then around that is a 5% again all the way from New Mexico up into Montana and North Dakota there into the surrounding states. And then we do have a little bit of a hail risk with this, and there is a 15% hail risk into parts of northeastern Montana, and then a 5% all the way from northern Montana and western North Dakota all the way to the south into parts of northeastern New Mexico and the panhandle of Texas and Oklahoma, as well as these states in between. So we also have 2 severe thunderstorm watches up for right now, and one is into southeastern Colorado and to northeastern New Mexico. And there's a moderate risk for severe wind, 65 knot plus winds, and severe hail with a low risk of 2 inch plus hail. And this will expire at 7 p.m. Mountain Daylight Time on September the 17th, 2024. And then looking at our other watch that was just issued about 5 minutes ago, we have another severe thunderstorm watch all the way from parts of northwestern Kansas into parts of northeastern Colorado, and then into parts of western Nebraska and southeastern Wyoming. And there's a high risk of severe wind, moderate risk for 65 knot plus wind, low risk for severe hail and low risk for 2-inch plus hail. And then the tornado risk is very low. And this will expire at 9 p.m. Mountain Daylight Time on September the 17th, 2024. So first looking at the 18Z HRRR and starting off in the central United States, we'll have storms that will continue to move into Colorado and northeastern New Mexico that will continue to strengthen, and those will head east into parts of Nebraska, eastern Colorado, northeastern New Mexico, eventually into the panhandle of Texas and Oklahoma. And then this is later this evening, and then kind of as we get to the nighttime hours, those will continue to the east, and you'll have that wind risk with those and just a little bit of a hail risk, but the wind risk will be the main risk with these storms, and those will continue to go east. And really that entire line will not really lose its strength until very late tonight into early tomorrow on Wednesday. And real quick, we'll look at instability for these areas, and as you can see, there isn't a whole lot of instability, but the main instability is up into Nebraska and then farther up into South Dakota, and mainly the Dakotas, and we'll talk about that in just a second. But that'll be the main storm risk for tonight. But there is plenty of moisture, especially into parts of Nebraska and Kansas, and there isn't very rich moisture, but there still is mid to upper 60s dew points in some spots, and that will definitely contribute towards that severe weather risk tonight. And then now we'll look at the NAM, and we'll compare the models here. So the NAM is quite a bit more aggressive, I would say, and we'll be looking at the 18Z NAM here, and the NAM shows some kind of isolated storms, and then those continue into northeastern New Mexico into the panhandle of Texas and Oklahoma, and then really this major line moves into Nebraska, eastern Colorado, and Kansas later tonight through this evening into tonight, and then those continue to the east, and those really don't begin to weaken until very late tonight to early tomorrow on Wednesday. Now looking at the north central United States, again looking at the NAM, and then we'll look at the HRRR in just a second. Here you can really see some major bowing segments of storms, and we'll go back here a little bit, but over the next couple of hours these will continue to the northeast, and you'll have storms that'll even form into Montana there, and then push into the Dakotas as well as Nebraska. And especially with storms like this, you'll definitely have to watch out for that wind risk with these storms, and these will continue all the way into late tonight and early tomorrow on Wednesday. And then you could have some isolated storms in the morning into Wednesday into the Dakotas there. And then we'll look at the HRRR here, look at the 18Z again. We'll go scroll down here. Same thing here. HRRR is pretty similar with these segments and bowing segments here, so that'll definitely support that wind risk into some of these areas, and does again have some more storms kind of lingering and maybe intensifying in the morning on Wednesday from the HRRR into parts of North Dakota and maybe even South Dakota, and then even into parts of Minnesota there as well. And then real quick, looking at the Florida Peninsula here, so over the next couple of hours you'll have storms that will begin to form into the Florida Peninsula, and these will pose a little bit of a wind threat, but not too much of a wind threat. But again, you will have those just kind of linger around, and you might have a few storms that kind of linger into late tonight and early tomorrow, but most of them should be out of Florida by late tonight into early tomorrow on Wednesday. Now looking at our day 2 outlook for tomorrow on Wednesday, September the 18th, 2024, we do have a large marginal risk all the way from northwestern Minnesota and northeastern North Dakota all the way to the south and parts of the central United States into parts of the panhandle of Texas there, and then into Oklahoma, and as well as Kansas, Nebraska, South Dakota, and even into northwestern Iowa. There is no tornado risk with this marginal risk at this time as of the latest 1730Z update from today, but we do have a wind risk associated with this marginal risk here, as well as a hail risk as well in the areas around, in the marginal risk for tomorrow. So just to get a better look at the entire storm system, we'll be looking at the continental United States sector. I know it's a little harder to see, but it's a better view, and you can kind of see all the moisture specifically right here. But we'll look at some of the storms in just a second. But tomorrow's risk will mainly be driven, not mainly, but partly be driven off of a dry line that kind of sets up tomorrow evening. So you have this pretty strong moisture feed all the way up into Canada there, and you'll just have this, you can see this gradient, strong gradient between moist air and a little bit dry air right there, and that continues all the way to the south, but mainly that'll be pretty strong into a pretty strong gradient tomorrow evening into tomorrow night. And as you can see right here into Oklahoma, you have a pretty strong gradient right there with that moisture. And then again, still looking at the 18Z HRRR, we'll look at composite reflectivity. I know it is kind of hard to see, but it'll just be better to, it's easier to kind of talk about the entire area at once. But you could have a few storms that begin to form into parts of northern Minnesota, a few into Iowa tomorrow evening, into tomorrow night, and then a few maybe into Oklahoma and the panhandle of Texas. And continuing on into the night, you might have a kind of a maybe a linear storm mode for just a little bit, some clusters forming into the panhandle of Texas, into Oklahoma, maybe where that dry line sets up, and then even into Minnesota, South Dakota, as well as Kansas and Nebraska. You could have a few storms that could have some that could produce some hail and some damaging winds, but the severe weather risk for tomorrow is not too high. But again, those storms will continue throughout the day into parts of the central United States, and we'll look at the NAM as well. And then again, you could get some storms early tomorrow morning into parts of North Dakota, even into Minnesota, and then those storms will get going kind of into the panhandle of Texas, Oklahoma, Minnesota, Iowa, Kansas, Nebraska there. And then again, the NAM kind of shows this storm mode down here into Oklahoma and Texas of maybe some clusters and maybe like a linear setup there with those storms kind of headed kind of going northeast a little bit, but mainly east right there. And most of these storms, really almost all these storms, will be kind of forming right on the dry line, so you won't have a lot of storms that form out ahead of this line, but you may have a few isolated if they do get kind of farther out into the moisture. But most of them will be riding along the kind of boundary here between the rich moisture and dry air kind of throughout the day tomorrow. And then looking at the day 3 outlook for Thursday, September the 19th, 2024, we do have a slight risk and a marginal risk at this time into northern Minnesota, kind of northwestern Wisconsin, all the way into parts of northern Iowa. And around that is a marginal risk all the way from northern Minnesota into Wisconsin, into Iowa, and then into parts of northern Missouri, as well as extreme northeastern Kansas there. And but that is their area right now, and so we don't have any hail risk or tornado risk associated with this, or not associated, but we don't have any risk from the Storm Prediction Center at this time, because they do not give out tornado wind or hail risk for the day 3 outlook. Only the probabilistic here, and so we just have a 15% risk, so that is a automatic slight risk, and a 5%, which is a automatic marginal risk. But again, they do not issue hail, tornado, or wind risk for the day 3 outlook, or I would show that if they would, but that is for the day 3 outlook for Thursday. So we're not going to be looking at any short range models for Thursday's severe weather risk, but we will look at the long range models, and we'll be looking at the GFS specifically. And so you can see here, we'll be looking at the 500 millibar winds, which are basically in the mid levels of the atmosphere. And so here you can see our trough that we'll be talking about, and this is responsible for our severe weather risk today. And then you can see how that trough basically continues to the northeast, and then you'll have that secondary severe weather risk tomorrow, and again then you'll have that moving kind of northeast, and then eventually on Thursday it'll kind of it'll amplify a little bit and deepen just a little bit, and you'll have that 500 millibar flow into parts of Minnesota, Wisconsin, Iowa as well. And so looking at the low level jet with this, the 850 millibar winds, which are the low levels of the atmosphere, will go to Thursday. And so you will have a kind of a low level jet with this system, so there might be just a little bit of a tornado risk with this for Thursday, but we'll have to watch and see if the instability is able to overlap with the low level jet, and if it is, then they'll definitely have a greater tornado risk. But we'll take a sounding. We'll take a sounding kind of maybe like right here in Minnesota and see if we can get a good sounding. Here's a okay sounding. You do have some instability here, sufficient instability, and you do have a little bit of a curve in the photograph, not much. But we'll look at some of the instability. We'll look at surface-based CAPE, and you don't have a lot of instability, but in some of the areas that you can have that overlap, as I said earlier, you'll have just a little bit of a chance for a little bit of a tornado risk, I would say. But still, they have not issued any risk for that, but I do think there will be a little bit of a risk. But again, here's a little bit of a curved photograph here. I keep saying a little bit, but here is a curved photograph right here, and so that would be kind of supportive of a little bit of a tornado risk. And then you do have definitely some strong mid to upper level winds, so there will probably be a hail risk with this system for Thursday's severe weather risk. And then real quick, we'll look at moisture, and you can see how that moisture really gets pushed to the north here on Thursday. And then yeah, you have pretty rich moisture, dew points into the mid and lower 70s, even to the upper 70s in some spots, and that'll definitely be supportive of a severe weather risk in these areas. So here's a little bit of a better sounding, plenty of instability here, and a curved photograph with that. So I would definitely keep a watch on this for Thursday's severe weather threat, considering we have a slight risk already for Thursday. So I personally think it'll be upgraded to a enhanced risk maybe tomorrow, or might not even be upgraded to one until Thursday. But again, just continue to monitor that risk if you live in any of the areas affected by that risk. So lastly, we'll be looking at the National Hurricane Center, and we only have one area of potential development for the 7-day outlook, and that is the remnants from what was Tropical Storm Gordon. And so the remnants of Gordon do have a little bit of a chance to develop again, but it really won't have any chance of affecting anybody if it does get developed again. But this is the latest update, 1:30 p.m. I'll go ahead and refresh the page just to make sure. Yeah, that is the latest update. But again, that's the only area at this time highlighted by the National Hurricane Center. So just real quick, we'll take a look at the remnants from Gordon and see how this area might play out. So looking at the 12Z GFS here, it does have the remnants from Gordon re-intensifying into maybe a hurricane, and it kind of continues to the northeast, and it may end up affecting the Canary Islands, but really it's too far out to look at specifics, because it is, again, really not really, but too far out to get a good look at it at this time. And the European model does not even have it developing, and but we'll just have to continue to watch this over the next couple of days and just see how it could develop. But looking at the relative humidity values, the European does not have it developing because it just enters the area of very dry air, and it does not have the chance to re-intensify. But the GFS kind of has it entering an area with some moist air, and it kind of creates its own environment, and just kind of merges with the flow and goes to the northeast. But this would probably be the more aggressive scenario if this were to happen. But again, it's pretty far out to tell, and there's a lot to figure out between now and really a week from now, really on the GFS. So just continue to monitor this system. We'll continue to monitor the system, and I kind of keep a watch on it. So finally, looking at parts of the Western Atlantic, and this is the only area I was going to look at real quick, have y'all look at. So there is no area from the National Hurricane Center that has an area to develop at this time. But looking here at the GEFS ensemble, and this is just a mix of different members, and it basically gives us an average of what each member shows in some of the areas that we could see systems potentially develop. And so really no signals over the next day or two, but then as we get into Thursday and Friday, eventually into this weekend, we do have some signals down here into parts of the Caribbean, and then those continue to the north, and we have some more signals there into this weekend. Then we get even more signals as we go into early next week, but then really after that is it's just too far out to get a good look at. But I'll go ahead and play the run out here from the 12Z GEFS, and so there's definitely some potent signals showing up here kind of early into early next week on the GEFS. And so we'll just have to continue to watch that and see how that might play out. But again, it's way too far out to get a good look at this right now. But I would not be surprised at all if we see the National Hurricane Center put some outlooks out for, or issue some outlooks for any areas down here into the Caribbean, because there is just very strong signals, especially on the GEFS ensemble. We'll look at the EPS ensemble in just a second. But again, I do expect, or I wouldn't be surprised if we do see some areas of potential development issued by the National Hurricane Center maybe later this week into this weekend, maybe regarding this signal here. But real quick, we'll look at the EPS ensemble. And so we'll go back to Thursday, then going into Friday, still a little bit of a signal down there. And then by early next week on Monday, you have definitely some signals showing up here as well. And the EPS also shows that, but the run is still loading where I would show farther out. But again, just that far out is kind of unreliable. But there is a little bit of a signal on the EPS, not as strong as the GEFS, but this will still be an area to continue to watch over the next several days into early next week. So that's going to be it for this video, and I really do appreciate all of y'all who watch my videos and all the support from the videos I've been getting. I am going to continue to make updates. I might have one out tomorrow, but I'll try to have one out Thursday. But my main thing for right now is just to continue to monitor the severe weather threats, and really I think after this other trough kind of moves through into parts of Minnesota and Wisconsin, that we might have a little bit of a period where we don't have a lot of not widespread, but as potent severe risk as we've been kind of having. But I'll also be continuing to watch that area of potential development into the Caribbean. But again, I do appreciate all of you watching, and I hope y'all have a great rest of y'all's day.